I need some traction. You need some traction.
Everyone, Lloyd Lobo here, co-founder at Boast AI. Thanks for joining us. Boast AI is on a mission to help entrepreneurs and innovators become successful by giving them access to government funding and all the resources they need. Today's session is super exciting on everything you need to know to supercharge your referrals. Today's Traction webinar is brought to you by Boast AI and Launch Academy. I am super excited for today's session. We got 527 people registered. You know, word of mouth is one of the most effective forms of marketing, but probably one of the most effective, most difficult things to predict and scale. You know, it's funny is last year, about 69 or so percent of Boast's new customer logos came from referrals. But like, I don't know how it all came about. We didn't have a formal referral program, but word of mouth was kicking, right? People that come from word of mouth are like 5x more times likely to sign up with you as a customer than somebody you cold email. And I couldn't find a better speaker for this topic than Nick. Nick's the CEO of Decent, which is one of the top providers of affordable healthcare for startups. And he's a serial entrepreneur. He scaled his first company to millions and sold it to Napster. He worked with a team at Kindle at Amazon, and then he led the growth team at Gusto, which recently gained a 10 billion valuation. And Gusto is one of the top payroll providers. And Nick knows everything about how to build and scale your referral program for supercharged growth. And Nick also mentors at Referrals, which is a program for growth marketers and product leaders. Awesome, Nick. Welcome to Traction. Thanks for joining us. How are you?
Thank you so much for having me. I'm having a really wonderful day already. I always like it when I get to talk to you. This is probably my favorite topic to talk about in the world. So we were talking before other folks showed up, like, I would love to talk about this all day long. Thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Definitely. Awesome. Excited. And I'm wearing these glasses. Probably I rarely do it, but I just had a baby unexpectedly 3 weeks preterm and, exciting times. I was in Austin, actually, of all the places. And then I get a call from my wife saying, I'm going to labor 3 weeks early. You got to come. So I head back, came in, and then Sunday we had the baby. And now I'm like shuttling between home and hospital. But exciting times. I'm super pumped on life, pumped on business, pumped on everything else. So, give us your backstory, man. How did you get into Decent and where you are today? Walk us through your journey.
Sure. I'll walk you through the journey. So the first thing you should know, I'm the only one in my family, literally, who's not a primary care doctor. So I grew up with doctor parents and a doctor sister and doctor aunts and doctor uncles. And I said, I'm not going into healthcare. I heard my family talk about how challenging it was and how it had become a harder time to be a doctor than any time in the last 50 years. And so I decided to become an entrepreneur instead. And I started a couple of companies. We'll talk a little bit more about how I use referrals to scale those companies to millions of users. It's by far my favorite channel. If I am a one-trick pony, that's the trick. And I ended up working in the startup world, selling my first company, as you'd mentioned, to Napster, coming to build the growth team at Gusto, which is a tremendous organization. I had very little to do with their most recent valuation, but was super excited to see it. And then ended up back in healthcare. And there's a variety of things that happened, from my own bout with paralysis and health issues to just having to reflect deeply on sort of what I had enjoyed and not enjoyed about my first run through as an entrepreneur, from founding to selling. I wanted to work on something that's meaningful, and affordable healthcare is really meaningful to me. It felt a little bit like just when I thought I was out, they brought me back in. But here I am in healthcare. I run decent.com, Decent, which bands together small companies so they can get the better rates and regulatory treatments that big companies do. And just because I'm really proud of what we're doing, I'll talk about it for 30 seconds. We have plans that are affordable, ACA compliant, which means they're comprehensive, and they're about 35 to 40% cheaper than market rates. And the net promoter score on these plans is 79 versus an industry average of 19. And I'm totally talking about that because I'm proud of what we're building, but also that net promoter score of building something that people love is at the heart of any good and really performant long-term referral program. So we're going to talk more about that today.
At Decent, I mean, over the years, all your experiences, cheesy pun, but you've become a pretty decent CEO as well.
I like to think that, although to be honest with you, these days I hope to be an even better dad. The work stuff is what I get to do when I'm not hanging out with my wife and my two sons in Northern California.
A lot of what we do as entrepreneurs, like work, the lines between work and life are blurred. And so if you're happy at work, you're happy at home. If you're happy at home, you're happy at work. Awesome. Let's get right into it. How did referral programs become your superpower? Tell us, like, at the basics, what is a referral program?
A referral program, well, before I answer that question directly, I want to tell you why they matter in general, and then I'll tell you how I got there. My favorite definition of what growth teams do that I've ever heard comes from a gentleman who ran the Waze growth team at Google. And he said, good growth teams accelerate organic trends. There's so much in that 3 words. So I'm just going to say it again. Good growth teams accelerate organic trends. They find things that are already happening. They find things that people already want to do, and they make it easier for those people to do those things. So a really performant growth program can often look like identifying behaviors that will ultimately serve both you and your customers well, and reducing the friction. And actually, we'll talk a lot about incentives, and there's a tremendous amount of value in aligning incentives and optimizing your incentive, but it's just as important to make it easy for people to do the things that they already want to do. That's at the heart of a really performant growth program. A referral program, simply put, is a program by which existing users can convince other people to try out your product. There's a small distinction with an affiliate program. An affiliate program is a program by which non-users can convince potential users to try out your product. So it's good to understand that those two things are similar. And you'd ask me how I got into referral programs and why they're my superpower. I grew up outside of Seattle, and I grew up in an entrepreneurial environment where it was very supportive. It wasn't the Bay Area where I live now. And the joke was sort of, you raise a couple $1 million for a startup, you either immediately look like Amazon or you just go back to work at regular Amazon. So I was told by an angel investor in Seattle that he was interested in this first product that I was building. And it was basically a social chat app. And he said, I'm interested and I'll fund you, but only if you can get 10,000 members in the next 3 months. And I remember, with the naivete of any good first-time entrepreneur, I was like, that can't be so hard. I can find a way to get 10,000 users in the next 3 months. I didn't have any budget. I didn't have any real experience running marketing programs. And by process of elimination, I realized that the only thing that I could make happen that quickly was if I could get people to invite their friends to this program. And so I ended up creating my first referral program on top of the Facebook chat API, just to prove to the Seattle investor that I could do it.
And your text is beeping, so I hope that doesn't continue.
Yeah, let me turn that down. Thank you.
Like that phrase again. Can you repeat that phrase that you started with?
Yeah, good growth teams accelerate organic trends. But I want to speak directly to the audience, because I think a lot of people joining here today may not think of themselves as part of a growth team. You can be a one-person growth team when you're a founder of a company. Growth comes from when you find a way to accelerate organic trends. The opposite of accelerating organic trends is forcing people to do something that they don't want to do, and you'll find that they're unlikely to do it. But tremendous amount of getting a referral program right is understanding your user psychology. What are the things they want to do? How can you make it more enticing for them to do those things? How can you remove friction from them doing those things?
Definitely. And there's, we're in this world where there's a billion different channels, right? From social to paid, to inbound to outbound, and every channel sort of gets exhausted, right? Like outbound email was a big thing. Email is still a pretty big thing, but the amount of spam you get, it's hard to cut through inboxes. LinkedIn's getting up there, but referrals have consistently stayed and sort of is the most evergreen channel. Why do you say it's useful for companies to look at referral programs and implement something? Like, what are your sort of top 1 or 2 things?
I guess the reason is because the first thing you should do is make sure you're making something people want. And a referral program won't really work unless you've already made something people want. So it's not a substitute for building a product that users want. But once you have that, And I'm seeing that in the comments, people are asking for specific examples, and I'm happy to provide them. Once you have that, you should be trying to make it as easy as possible for your existing users to share information about your program. And that is a core mechanic of human psychology, that word of mouth is the biggest driver of growth in history that transcends what the popular channel of the time is. I'll give you an example, because people said, well, how do you get 10,000 users in 3 months? Here's what we did. We looked at the Facebook chat API. We looked at the mechanics of the program or the product that we were building, which was just social chat. And we said, hey, it looks like there's a whole lot of people that are on Facebook, obvious point number one. And it looks like the chat API will allow us to let our users invite a whole lot of people at the same time. And a thing that you always have to be thoughtful about, and to be honest, I've been on both sides of this fence, is you can take a channel, and Twitter, you can still do this. SMS on Android, you can still do this. You can create an experience where people push a button and a whole lot of their contacts will get a message that, depending on the content of the message and the benefit of the message, could look a lot like spam. And I'll totally acknowledge I've sort of played on both sides of that fence. But what we did is we looked at the chat API, we talked to a lot of members, and we said, well, what do you like about this product, which was called Reveal Chat, and what don't you like? And they said, well, I really like when I get a chance to talk to someone, especially when it's someone who I have some things in common with, but I don't like it because it was a synchronous chat product when I show up and nobody is available to talk to me. And so we said, okay, well, would you be willing to offer a lightweight invite to your friends if we made that really easy for you to do? And about 20% of people were like, yeah, that's easy for me to do. I'm used to doing this on Facebook all the time. So we reverse engineered the chat API to understand the rate limits. And it's really important anytime you're building on a third-party platform, understand that these platforms are going to have different perspectives on what's spam, on what's reasonable. We never broke any rules at Facebook, but we were absolutely aggressive. And I think some of the bigger companies that came out early in Facebook, like Zynga, which built a tremendous business that was aggressive on the back of wall posts, they were always walking that line of where's the spamming and where's the sort of value to users. What we did is we said, we know that about 20% of our members are at least saying that they'd be willing to invite friends. Let's make it really easy for them to customize a message and push a button to invite a whole lot of friends at the same time. And then let's make sure we reduce the friction of the recipients of that message so they can immediately see the value proposition of Reveal Chat and decide if they want to be part of it or not. And then we optimize the heck out of it. And I'm trying to abstract out here to where the approach could be used across multiple channels. Here's the deal. Good growth people, for better or for worse, often make fun of good, paid ads marketing people. And it's not really fair, but there's a little bit of an attitude of, well, the paid market is efficient. There are some really good, talented paid ad operators, and it can make a world of difference for your product to get somebody that knows what they're doing with paid advertising versus somebody who's just guessing. But there are a lot of organic growth people like me that sort of go, look, that market is so efficient that early stage startups that don't have budgets are going to be blocked out. So we have to find alternatives to traditional efficient paid advertising. If anything, and I did this, and I highly recommend that you explore this as you look at a referral program, paid can be a great way to get a medium-sized number of people into your referral channel so that they start going through the process to potentially invite friends. And you can see whether it actually works or whether it doesn't. I used paid in my early days almost exclusively to get people in the door to test the referral flows, because I knew most of our growth was going to come from those referral flows. And I'd mentioned the 10,000 members in 3 months, and we did that. We actually got up to a point where we were growing at 50,000 members a day, which was super, super exciting. And the reason I'm sharing this with you, I want to make sure I'm providing something of value. There's innumerable channels. They typically split out to either some sort of a public share, like a Facebook wall post. Those used to be a lot more prominent than they are now, honestly. And you can get a whole lot of people looking at and clicking through those wall posts. Now there's not as much of that, but there's lots of sharing on TikTok. There's lots of sharing on LinkedIn. There's lots of other new channels that you can use for that. Or private share, which is email, which can definitely feel overwhelmed with spam, but it can also be an extremely performant channel. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. You need to decide whether this is something that's going to grow faster on public or private. My expertise is more of these private shares. And then you literally treat it as if it's any other engine of your business, from your unit economics you're going to look at every piece of it from a math perspective and figure out where can we optimize and push up these numbers. The answer to growing to 10,000 members in 3 months is optimizing the heck out of it for 2.5 months and letting it run for the remaining 1/2 of a month. It's not the sort of thing where you turn it on and on the first day that happens. But what I see teams doing too often and too quickly, they try one first shot at a referral program. I'm going to probably unfairly knock some of the out-of-the-box third-party referral platforms that, sure, they'll sell you something that won't give you the control or the ability that you're going to want to optimize something that works for your product. And they give it a try for a month and it doesn't immediately show results. You have to be really rigorous in your testing. And I find that really appealing. This is a great place for A/B testing once you have understood what it is that people get out of your product.
Definitely. So the first step here, though, is to understand, you're driving value, like people like your product and they're driving value, right? So Eric asks here, how do we know if public or private channels are best? How do you determine that?
It's a good question. So the honest answer is that it's a combination of two things. It's the viral mechanics of the channel itself, and then it's what is the thing that is a better core fit with what you're sharing. I'll tell you what I mean by both. There's a world where if you were building an app on Facebook 10 years ago, the answer was wall posts. It almost didn't matter, what you were building. You could have been building an app that helps people signal early signs of, venereal disease. Like the channel was so performant that you sort of hold your nose and you go, well, I know this channel is going to work. So as long as I don't make my users openly uncomfortable, it's probably worth trying. The better answer now is you look at the content that's being shared. And first of all, if there's user-generated content, the answer is public. That's sort of an easy shorthand. If user-generated content is the thing that's going to be delivering the value proposition of the app, then it's going to be public. If it's more of a sensitive subject, then it's going to be private. If you're building something that's in dating, if you're building something that's in health, it's unlikely you're going to be able to do much public sharing. If it's more of a complicated purchase process, it's also private, because the right way to think about this is the public shares get seen by everyone, but I'll promise you this, unless it's incredibly easy to immediately understand the value proposition of what's being shared, like on TikTok, and click in and decide if you want to, play a bigger part of it, it's just probably worth going private. When you go private, people feel more like they've been selected specifically to participate in the benefit. The click-through rate tends to be higher and the conversion rate tends to be higher, but you don't have the benefit of some, beautiful piece of video or content that gets, 500 clicks from different people right away.
What's an example of a good private channel, and how do you penetrate that?
Email is the best private channel, and I'll fight anybody that wants to say otherwise. It's really shocking how good it still is, and here's why. It's because Google has taken over most non-corporate email and a tremendous amount of corporate email with their apps. It's been called 15 different things, but the thing that all of our startups are on, that thing. Yeah, Google allows you to do more things with email than you'd be able to with almost any other private channel if you are thoughtful and careful. And I'll give you two examples. Here's how Facebook grew, and people don't always remember this. They still do the same thing. If you really want to see a well-executed growth channel, go sign up for a new Facebook account today or a new LinkedIn account today. And here's what you'll see. Even now, even when we all complain about email all the time, they're going to bring you into their user flow. They're going to start to make the case that Facebook or LinkedIn is better with friends, and they're going to try to get you to connect your email account. And Google has made it incredibly easy to connect your email account in a way that it never was before. So you're literally clicking once that you want to connect it. You're clicking to approve a number of different permissions. And all of a sudden, you've got full access to those contacts. Now, it used to be, and I'm so excited about this, Lloyd, you have to interrupt me if you want me to slow down or talk about this in a different order. It used to be that you just pull those contacts and you can ping everybody, and it doesn't really matter that only 10% of them are going to be relevant recipients. Now that'll get you blacklisted. Now that'll get you put on spam reports. But at the same time, these countermeasures have come up with sites like Clearbit. And Clearbit is a really interesting one to know about. Clearbit, you take a bunch of email addresses, you run them through Clearbit, and they'll return information that they have associated those email addresses with Facebook accounts, with LinkedIn accounts, with Twitter accounts. They'll provide metadata about their geographic location, about the work that they're doing. You can actually do a whole lot better job than you used to be able to, just taking an email address and using that to figure out who is relevant for whatever offer you're going to make. And this is related to the public and private thing too. TikTok works for everybody. My mom occasionally sees a good TikTok and says, hey, that was funny. She'll enjoy it. Most of my friends see it. I'm a little old for it at 41, but I still can get the value of it. For more specialized stuff like SaaS, it's going to be private. And just to be really blunt with you, the thing that you're going to want to do is build an experience that gives the inviter enough control that they don't feel like they're just spamming all their friends, that instead either they can choose the people that they know who are the best recipient for your offer. And I did a whole lot of this work at Gusto. Or better yet, you're using services like Clearbit in the back end to bubble up the folks that you think would be the best fit for your service that they might know, and just suggesting them. You always give them a chance to say no. You always give them a chance to choose other people, but it's relatively straightforward to set up this combination of email import and using tools like Clearbit to be able to sort of filter the list until it's people that you want to see. Now, I want to come back to how Facebook grows. They're going to come in and tell you Facebook's better with friends. They're going to get you to connect your email addresses. Nobody knows this. And so I'm going to share this with you. I haven't checked for 3 months, but this is true 3 months ago. I suspect it's still true. If you create a new account with Facebook, down at the very bottom of the fine print of why you should connect your email address so they can connect you with friends, it says something like contacts may be used to make friend suggestions. And that sounds extremely innocuous. They've got some tremendous copywriters over there. Here's what that actually means. If you ever set up a Facebook account with a dummy email, which I have, and weirdos who do growth stuff typically have done this, you won't see anything for a while. And then like a month later, you'll start to get an email with a photo of one of your friends if you've connected your contacts. And it'll say, hey, Jacob wants to connect with you on Facebook. And they're using those emails, even though you haven't signaled that you want to send to anybody, they're using those emails to make friend suggestions, which means to suggest that you should join the platform. LinkedIn does something very similar. Dropbox, at least last I looked, when you try to sign up with Dropbox with an email account that's a Google account, they won't even explain why they want the permissions to look at all your contacts. They'll just immediately pop that contact screen. So the private channel that outlives all the other ones continues to be email. Another trick that you can do with email that is worth considering, on the same permissions flow where somebody can say, yeah, I want to give this app access to my contacts, it can also ask to send email on your behalf. And that is actually crazy because, Lloyd, the email will look identical to if you had sat down and sent an email to me at nick@decent.com. All that means is that either you really did, or an app requested that permission to send email as you. Now, I'm not encouraging spam. I'm really not. Like, that can get you in trouble. I've definitely had a company crash and burn because the value wasn't great enough for the aggressive tactics that we were using. But think about the power of being able to actually send with the user's consent, super, super important, just as if you were them. And ultimately, having been a young entrepreneur and wanting to kind of see this thing grow so I could stay alive versus being a more experienced older entrepreneur now, build a product that people love. It's really, really important, and never surprise your users. And those are really the only two bars that I would put up there. There's going to be a lot of people that would argue that something is objectively too aggressive, or you could never, have any invite all functionality, even if the technology supports it. I don't agree with any of that. I think it's don't surprise your users, make sure they know what they're getting into, and make sure you're talking to them to understand the value proposition. There are many more companies that are not aggressive enough, in my opinion, versus companies that are too aggressive. Like, when you're trying to acquire customers as an early stage startup, there are ways to do it that are less annoying, but don't think, oh, I can't send one email, that would be too much. It's just very, very hard to break through the noise if you have that kind of bar.
I want to dive into the different types of referral models. Like, what are the different types of referral models that you've used that have worked, and how to determine which referral strategy is right for your business?
I think there's a 2x2 matrix here. You can look at referrals that are free or paid. and you look at referrals that are public or private, and realistically, I've never seen a paid public referral. And so typically, if you're enticing people to share something out, you're going to end up not paying them money to do that. Now, that said, I want to take a step back. Here's a really important thing to understand. In referrals, and I think arguably startups in general, the power law completely applies in referrals. And what that means is it does not make sense for you to have 7 different ways that people can share and equally optimize all 7. If I would even posit that if you can't find one channel that outperforms all the others within a couple months of testing, referrals is probably not the right growth channel for your business, because every single performant referral flow that I've ever seen is predominated by one channel. For Facebook and LinkedIn, it's going to be email. There are some apps that have sort of grown on Twitter. There's actually a fair amount of public sharing capability in Twitter apps that I'm actually surprised people haven't made more use of. But there's going to be one channel that is sort of dominant. And Lloyd, I have to be honest, remind me of your specific question, because I think I just went on a rant.
I said, what are the different types of referrals models, and how do you pick the right strategy for you? And you said there was a 2x2 matrix, and then you...
Yeah, there's a 2x2 matrix, and then I ranted. Here's the deal. If you can't afford to pay people to refer their friends, then you're going to be going free. There's something in the middle, which is what Dropbox uses, and this is sort of the end all be all. If you can actually make something in your product available instead of money, for Dropbox, that's going to be storage space. That's a tremendous way to do something that's technically free, but the user really feels like they're getting value. But in general, if you're working in SaaS, if you're working like at Decent, where there's, if we can make, when we make health insurance more affordable for people, they pay us money, and there's real money attached, then it's probably worth putting together a paid program, even for apps that there is a real network effect. And a network effect is a key term to understand. A network effect is the product gets better when the people I know are using it. When you can afford to incentivize people with some sort of financial benefit, it's worth doing. A thing that you absolutely need to test and iterate on is whether you want to incentivize the inviter or the invited person, or both. What a lot of top performing platforms like Airbnb, I apologize for that ding, I don't know how to turn it off on my computer, have found is that recipients often are the more important people to incentivize. If people really think Airbnb is good, then I believe that they've run a lot of different tests. I think at this point they incentivize both sides, but it's pretty normal that you would incentivize the recipient financially even more so than the sender. But that's something you just have to test and iterate on. For public, I guess what I've seen is this. I'm really wary a little bit. I mentioned I'm more of a fan of private channels. I think that the Facebook wall post saga kind of convinced people that most public sharing is spammy. And I've seen so many people come back to me when I'm advising a startup and they say, good news, we got a whole lot of people to share a link publicly. And I said, well, have you looked at the click-through and the conversion on that link? And it's always terrible. And honestly, it's usually driven by bots. So I'm telling you that unless you're building a social product where there's a lot of user-generated content or otherwise visual or compelling content for a lot of people to click through, you're probably better off with private. And if you can afford to pay people, you should. That's the short heuristic for how to pick which is right for you.
Awesome. So the framework then, let's walk through in steps, right? You have a product, you're starting out, you have a product, people love it, you have high retention, right? And this is the frame you walk with, right? You solve for referrals once you have a product that people love and want to pay for, and you have a high retention, right? If you have crappy retention, that means you don't focus on more acquisition, whether through referrals or anything else, right?
You don't, and you don't, and I have. So let me try to reconcile those two ideas. You can get away with that for a little while. You can get away with that, and there's startups every year that come out to VCs with a compelling growth curve, and someone will give you money, especially in this environment. What I would actually say, if I was, having a couple beers with hundreds of friends instead of just on a very public webinar, if you're doing that, you need to really believe that you'll have an inflection point in the future where the product is going to get a lot better, typically because there's going to be more people on it. That would be the only real rationale, because it's not a lasting strategy. Now, that said, startups can be dog eat dog. It can feel very tough. I have absolutely built a spam cannon in the past in order to sort of get, a company to show that it had enough traction that we could try to make the experience better. What I'll say is it often feels like flying too close to the sun. It usually doesn't work out. Almost always, unless you're desperate and have no other options, you are better off building something people love first.
Definitely. Now, Jill asked here, which is a very relevant question. Right? We're talking about sort of product-led referrals. So, you have a product, you have high retention. Now you got to figure out at what point and what type of referral program do I insert through product. And we talked about email being the biggest driver. And I cannot agree with you more. Traction is about 111,000 subscribers or something like that. Even this session here, we got 527 people registered. We send one promo for, or maybe 1.5 promo. We send a promo and then we send it to everyone who didn't open a day later. But because we're doing Tuesday and Thursday, we can only send one blast, right? And 99.9% of the people that come is through email. Email is the biggest driver. And if that email is coming through a friend, and personalized, there's that sort of transference of trust. And so you say, okay, now you have a product that has high retention. You pick the medium. Yes, you can get people sharing on social channels, but email is the biggest driver. And then the third thing is whether it's a referral incentive that's money or that's free product usage-based sort of thing, right? Like Dropbox did.
That's right. And there's something really important to understand. There's actually a book called Predictably Irrational that has this incredible scene in one of the chapters about having Thanksgiving dinner at your in-laws' place. And you have such a great meal and you're sitting back and you're appreciating the whole group around you. And you're so happy that you reach into your wallet and you pull out $50 and you put it on the table. And I hope everybody cringed hearing that out loud, because that's a very awkward moment when you try to take something that should feel social and communal and inject a transaction in it. So this is something you need to be thoughtful about and careful about when you decide whether you're going to build a financial incentive. I'll just pick on Lloyd because I like Lloyd. If I get an email from Lloyd every day and he's promoting a different service and it mentions that he'll get paid $50 if I sign up, at some point that transferal of trust that you mentioned, which is totally the right way to think about referral sharing, is going to be degraded. And I'm going to be like, dude, you're literally just trying to do this to make money. Like, I feel like I'm being pimped, if anything, instead of that you're helping me find services that I could enjoy. This is why it can often make more sense to find a real benefit, because your product is honestly going to have more success with referrals if there's value to both parties when they know other people on the platform. But even if you can't do that, you really have to make sure that the recipient doesn't feel like, oh, I'm just getting spam because, my friend is trying to make money. That's another reason for leaning on the side of rewarding the recipient. And with rewarding the recipient, it's still not enough. It can't be, hey, here's $25 to try out this service you've never heard of. I want to make this advice tactical and practical. So here's what I would say. After you've found a way to build something people love, sit down with 5 to 10 of your users and ask them an incredibly important question, which is, how would you describe my service to a friend? You're looking for one sentence, as few words as possible, and you're going to use that as the copy that is V1 of your referral program. You're going to make it easy for people to use that exact language, and then you can iterate and optimize around it. But you'll be surprised at how members describe your product, how users describe your product that might be different from how your marketing team decided they wanted to do it, et cetera. And the answer, in terms of running hundreds or thousands of conversion tests to date, as I have, you're always going to want to take the language of the user. And that's going to be the thing that really converts once you've identified the right channel.
Definitely. So this is where we're at in the equation, right? We're trying to identify what are the key elements of a high converting referral program. We said products people love, build a product that people love, high retention, figure out the message, right? Like you talked about, talk to you 5-10 users, then come up with the program, because you don't want to you don't want to always offer cash and make people feel like, it's dirty kind of thing. People are referring for trust. So whatever motivates them, and it could be maybe donation to a charity in some cases. If you have a whole bunch of, if your network is high net worth individuals who don't care about money, and don't care about free product, maybe it's like, I don't know, it's donating to charity or something else.
But like, yeah, I want to use another, I'm trying to listen to the feedback in the comments. By the way, all of you can absolutely put comments in there. I want to make this useful for you. Otherwise, it's not worth either of our time. So please add any hard questions that you have. Here's another example. Clubhouse. It's weird to think about this, but their growth has come almost exclusively from their referral program, even though they were exclusive to iOS and they only gave people a very limited number of invites from day one. I'm friendly with Paul Davison. We went to college together. I was, in there in the first month, and it was cool to see it grow. But status is an incredibly important thing that can drive people to share if they feel like sharing will make them look cool. You're sort of better if you can create that feeling, because it's also cheaper, because Paul doesn't have to pay people, to invite. And one of the ways you can do that is with something that looks like more of a gated community. We're only going to offer a certain number of signups, et cetera. But the very people who would be optimal users that you'd be bragging to, your friends and family about if they used your app are going to be people that might be drawn to sort of what Naval would call status games. What are the things that I'm going to get early access to? This is another way you can see the referral program. If you're building something that lends itself to use by influencers, and a simple heuristic is if content is being created, then you're definitely going to be better off, if you can get some influencers using it. Even though it might sound like the opposite of a high volume referral program, you'd be surprised at what will happen if you can create that sense of exclusivity and then give people a way to invite a limited number of people. It again, what you're getting at is nobody wants to feel spammed at, but at the same time, you need to get as many eyeballs in front of what you're looking at and the value proposition you're offering as possible. And so status is another real way to look at that. I would say if there's not a real network effect, meaning the product doesn't get significantly better, and you'll know, like, don't bullshit yourself when people use it and they know each other, and you can't kind of create a feeling of status, then you end up in the transactional realm of, how am I going to affect this with money? And I'd say about 80% of companies that can build great referral programs will land there, but it's probably worth going through the process.
Yeah. And right away, if your product is not inherently viral, right? Like a lot of like Zoom, for example, is inherently viral. Anything that requires two people to engage, two or more people to engage, to create an outcome, is inherently viral, right? And so then you probably don't go heavy in it. And then probably the next step after that is the status piece, right? Like Instagram and Clubhouse.
It is. And I want to, I've been in so many of these webinars as a guest, hearing only the good stuff and, people that make it sound like they can kiss their hand and referrals fly out the door. I want to tell you at least one thing that I did that was bad, where I probably almost got fired from Gusto, honestly. Gusto is a payroll platform. It's hard to make an argument that the companies on the Gusto payroll platform are better off if other companies also join the Gusto platform. It'd be
100%
brain of an argument. So let's ignore that. Not really an easy way to get status by being like, hey, check out this cool payroll platform. Plus, and this is a major thing for you to think about, invitation to join Gusto is only going to be relevant to a very small percentage of the people that I know.
Because small businesses, it's payroll for small businesses.
Yeah, and who's the decision maker for a small business? Probably a founder, possibly somebody running HR. I did one good thing and one very bad thing. The good thing that I did is I juiced Gusto's referral program. So instead of just saying, hey, here's all your friends, you should invite all your friends, we used Clearbit and other services to bubble up the people that might be a good match. And that was a real win because we.
And how did you do that exactly, right? Like what, because when you don't have a big user base initially, how do you juice that?
That's the magic of email. We said, we're going to offer you a financial incentive that's meaningful if you invite your friends and they join. And that is really important because that means we're getting paid before that referral payout is made. We sat down and did a bunch of user interviews, and I highly recommend this step. And we learned that people said, yeah, I do know people that would be a good fit for Gusto. I love Gusto and I would like to recommend it, but I can't think of who I know in the moment. And so we said, okay, we can work with that. We pulled down their email contact list. We ran it through multiple services, including Clearbit, and we looked at people that were founders or HR leads at early stage companies. And then we sent them an email and said, hey, we processed your contacts. We've got some recommendations for you. And what was amazing, Lloyd, it was amazing what percentage of people would kind of come in and they'd be like, okay, looks good. Invite. They would invite the people that we told them, these are people who are good.
But was it money that was motivating them?
It was money that was motivating them, but the gap that we closed for them, and this is about reducing the friction, they didn't have time to sit and think about who do I know who's a small business owner. But when we put somebody in front of them, they said yes. And I'll even tell you, this is a experiment that was aggressive enough that it never saw the light of day at Gusto, and it still wasn't the bad thing that I did. We actually ran a small scale test where we said, it feels like people really trust Gusto. What if instead of making them choose to invite these specific individual people, which they often would, we just said, click this button and we'll invite your top 10 matches. And like 40% of people clicked the button. They didn't even know who we were going to invite. They just said, yeah, I'm trying to make some money here. I trust you. You're going to figure it out. That ended up being deemed a little bit too aggressive. I want to answer a question that Kailash asked. In a B2B scenario with no contacts, how do you do that? Gusto is B2B, and the people who work at these companies still have a set of email contacts, and in the small business space, they often know each other. But that gets to Victor's question. The bad decision I made was this. I was too volume oriented. You know, at Gusto, I think in some ways I'm like all the bad things about a growth person. I'm like very metrics focused. I never want to miss a number. And I was like, oh, like I know we can pump more volume through this channel. And I got the dumb idea where I said, hey, we're getting a fair amount of success getting employers to invite other employers, but guess who's also on the Gusto app? All of the employees. Well, then obviously all we need to do is we need to give the employees a way to invite all of their relevant contacts to Gusto. And we built a flow that once you come in and you do the things you need to do as an employee, and I will give total credit to Gusto because they were right about this and I was wrong. And like a gentleman on the design team who I'm still friends with was like, don't do this, this is bad. I was like, we just need to see, like, what if the employees will do this too? We had hundreds of thousands of invitations go out from those employees. It really worked from the perspective of driving.
And what was the flow exactly? So like you had these employees, how did you leverage Clearbit, but like, how did you tap into their contacts to recommend relevant contacts for them to refer?
The majority of them were on either Gmail or they were in a Google Apps account. So as soon as they entered their email address, we popped up a little thing that's like, give us access to your contacts. This is a truism, and I want to blame again myself. I did all these things wrong. Gusto's an incredible company. It's a truism that everybody says, well, we have to explain why we're asking for that. We have to do this and do that.
But people just click anyway.
Most people will just sort of click. And I think when I say don't surprise your user, I don't mean don't pop something they're not expecting to see. I mean, don't get them mad because.
But that screen is from Google's API anyway. It's so standard. People have become so used to seeing it that they click.
And this is what happened. If I'm being honest, I'm not trying to make it sound like some growth brilliance. People click through. We put it in the perfect place. And this is a good thing for you to all know that's tactical. If you want a big growth action, you want to get people to a place where they're otherwise sort of dead-ended. Maybe it's because they're waiting to be let into the product. Maybe it's because they've done all the things that they need to do to be able to onboard. And that's what we did for the employees. We said, hey, you've done everything, you can stop now, but hey, while you're here, you can make some money if you invite your contacts and they sign up for Gusto. And the thing that I learned, besides like the design team at Gusto is rightfully concerned about the user experience, we sent hundreds of thousands of these invitations. It happened very, very quickly. And it turned out that even when we had a pretty good match of an employee sending to a small business owner, the small business owner is kind of like, what the hell is this? I'm not getting this from somebody I would expect to be getting payroll recommendations from. The conversion on those things was really terrible. So I think we're going to talk a little bit more about the PIX model in a bit. We had discovered a way to get a high percentage of users to invite. They were sending a whole lot of invites each, but the conversion was absolutely awful. And to be honest, there's usually a tension between those two sides of the equation. You can get a small number of people inviting a small number of people and then really high conversion because it's really targeted, or you can get a lot of spam that goes out there and the conversion tends to be lower. you have to find a way to optimize to something that's
because when you populate someone's Google account, all kinds of people, um, all kinds of people show up, and there could be people they have no influence on, like employees, maybe everyone's showing up, and all of a sudden it's seen as it's seen as spam. But like, what got you almost fired from Gusto? This?
No, well, yes, it was that. They take the product very, very seriously. And I, came into a meeting and I was like, look at this giant number of messages sent. And I got stern talking to that was totally justified, because I'd basically just run roughshod over the desires and the concerns of the design department. I was like, you can't quantify that it's bad, so it's not. And I had to learn. But I actually want to share another. Can I share one more bad decision? And
yeah, definitely.
Then I'll focus on the good ones, because this is one that actually almost got somebody killed on my team. Maybe I'm being a little bit hyperbolic, but I'll explain what I mean. So the other problem is sometimes an invitation gets sent when you're too aggressive to someone that not only doesn't have context on what's being offered, maybe it's somebody's ex-boyfriend, maybe it's somebody's ex-girlfriend, maybe it's somebody they never wanted to hear from again. We have tons of people that end up in our email accounts or in our phones. This is at my most aggressive, and I'm not proud of this. We had figured out that Android still allowed one-to-many messages to be routed through the phone without the user having to send each one manually, the way that iOS requires. I think Android may have shored this up by now, but for a long time, you could do more things with automation on Android than you could do on iOS. We were testing new growth channels for a mobile app. And by the way, this is useful. If you're building a mobile app, you probably want to get SMS as a major growth channel, because people are already on their phone, and SMS is by far the fastest and the most clicked channel. So then there's the friction of they have to go to the App Store and they have to download it. But we were testing some channels, and again, I have to admit, I've played on the gray hat and the dark side of the force a little bit. We wanted to see if there was any merit to these channels at all. So I had a couple of my developers had set up Google Voice accounts to use basically, spoof text messages, just to see if we could get people to reply. And we had a few people that had decided to connect their contacts. And so again, we weren't surprising them. We told them what was going to happen. They connected their contacts. The messages went out through my developer's Google Voice account, SMS, and it went to an account that had been in the user's phone, that the name on the account was Chapapote. And I had no idea what this term meant at the time. I get a call from one of my developers across the room. He's like, Nick, come over here. I think you need to see this. He'd gotten an SMS response, again, to his Google Voice account that said, how did you get my number? You need to delete this number. I'm going to find you and I'm going to kill you. And we thought, oh my God, like what is actually happening here? And it turned out that Chapapote is slang for heroin. And so somebody had a dealer in their phone and just listed under heroin or the name heroin. And I was very thankful that day. We'd been testing different variations. This happened to be a variation that didn't mention the name of the sender, which is very, very lucky. But I think it's illustrative of you can mess up somebody's day in a big way if you're not careful in putting these things out. And I share that. I don't do that kind of stuff now. But if you just chase the number, you really have to be thoughtful about the human situations you could be putting people into.
Definitely, definitely. Now, there's a bunch of questions here. Jill asks, Scott asks, referral affiliate programs for sort of non-software or non-online sign-up related. And I think my theory on this is there's a lot of third-party products out there, and I don't know what your opinion on that is. There's a Partner Stack, there's Referral Rock. Ultimately, you have to have some way online for people to give you referrals. You can be an offline service, right? But you need some way for people to refer you. Otherwise, how are they going to refer you? Because email introductions are not scalable. So what are your thoughts there on how to generate referrals with a B2B service that's not software?
To be really honest with you, I haven't found a program that's a third-party program that I like. I've thought about building one. I have a couple of friends that have built them and ended up getting acquired by someone more quickly than they were actually able to put it into practice. The thing that I don't like about them is that they don't give you the flexibility to do the more interesting stuff. And they certainly don't give you the flexibility to do the more aggressive stuff. That doesn't mean that there's not good ones out there. I haven't been looking at these third parties, but what I would say to you is this: if you have a budget for 2 engineers, you'd be surprised at how easy Google and Facebook and all of these services, whose growth itself depends on making it easy for people to share information via or on top of their platform, you'd be surprised at how easy they make it to build one of these things yourself. So I guess I don't have enough information to say that the existing services are bad, but I would say that I haven't found a great one, and don't assume that you absolutely need one. Now, to answer your other question, if I was running a spa and I needed to find a way to generate referrals, let's take the spa as a use case, because I saw somebody put this in the chat. My wife and I, honestly, have both loved a good spa experience. It's super good. And spa passes the test. It's better when you go with your friends. So already we have, a sign of a positive referral program. There's a status thing associated with spa, right? If you can share out that you found a really great spa, especially if it's a place that you might go with a friend, like, you're passing all of the tests of what a good referral program could look like. This is where no advice that I could give would be as good as sitting down with 10 people who've bought from your spa at least 5 times. We want to reward you as early customers to help us figure out our referral program that would get you really excited to talk to friends about this. Do not assume that people want to use a new app. Do not assume that they want to go and do a widget on your website. Sit with your customer and sort of say, how can we make this something that's easy for you to do and that you want to do? And you'd be surprised. Often the answer is, it's a little bit low tech. These people want to be able to mail, an invitation, but also there are human beings involved at a spa. So what I would really look at is a little bit like during sales. You learn pretty quickly. If you make a sale, almost always your next question should be, is there anybody else that I should be talking to who would be good for this? If somebody's just come in and they've had a good experience at your spa, I would test low tech offline channels like, hey, Lloyd, it looks like you had a really good time today. We're offering a limited time thing where, today, if you give me a couple of emails or contact information for people that you think might be interested in this, then we'll give you X dollars off your next visit, or we'll, incentivize you in the following way if you come into the spa together. This is a high touch experience with real humans involved. And I would start there before I tried to build anything with computers.
Definitely. Awesome. And then I threw some links there. Nick may have not used them. I haven't entirely either. So I would explore that, because if you're a service, an offline service, the hardest thing is like hiring devs, trying to direct them. And if you can hack something together by putting some landing page, ultimately you have a set of customers. Let's say you have 100 customers and they love you, right? You want to get them to refer. You just want to be able to reach out to them and get them to email. I think in the past, what I've even done something as simple as give somebody a canned tweet and a canned email to forward, and they've done it, right? And that actually,
you just said something super important that I want people to hear. Look, the dream is that everybody likes your service so much that they're going to take 20 minutes out of their day to sit down and write a loving email to every single one of their friends who might be a member, that's personalized and targeted and blah, 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 blah. And the truth is, almost nobody's ever going to do this. You will be doing your customers a favor if you test high converting copy and you make that available to them. And I want to talk about Decent for a second, because we had really good success with our very low tech, very limited first version of a referral program. And I'll tell you how limited it was, and everybody will go, okay, I can do that. What you end up needing when you have a referral program is a URL that identifies the person receiving the referral, so that you can track them in your system and make sure that the incentive is appropriately delivered. And optionally, if you're also going to reward the sender, identifies the sender. So what we did is we literally just took our customer list and we made them each a unique sharing URL. And we said, we're not even going to track, this one was public, it's not private. So we're not even going to track who individually gets this. We've created some copy. We know that you really like the service because you're giving us a 79 net promoter score, which I'm super proud of. Click here. I think we said if they get a quote, we'll give you $20, something like that. And it was off the charts successful. And the reason I'm bringing it up is because it was extremely low tech. We weren't using a technology service. We weren't even using email. Give people the freaking link and see if you can get them to share it, and you'll learn a ton.
Yeah, and you know what, you can give them canned email copy so they can forward and whatnot. And then one step further is, you send them that link and they can embed it somehow in their email, pop up the email and send it to a bunch of people. Now I want to get into your whole PIC framework. What is that PIC framework? Walk us through it.
I'm going to give you that, but I also want to answer a couple quick questions that have come up in the chat. So always run an email list through a service like Zero Bounce. Somebody mentioned maybe Clearbit's offering email cleanup itself at this point. If so, that's great. But there's services like Zero Bounce that will make sure that you don't end up sending to email addresses that aren't valid, et cetera. So super, super important. The other thing, and this is a couple questions that have come up on CAC, which is cost of customer acquisition. People will shortchange referrals all day long. And it sounds like I take that personally, because I kind of do, because I'm such a believer in this channel. What Lloyd said at the beginning is true. If the referral program is not just a spam cannon, these are customers that are going to stay longer. They're going to refer more friends, and they're going to be more likely to be happy with your service. And all of that is empirically tested through lots and lots of experiments. That's not just my ideas. So why is it that when we know those things, we don't just look at our current CAC and sort of say the job of a referral program is to beat our best other scalable option at CAC? And what you might learn, and as I learned in the health insurance business, where it's a lot of money being thrown around when somebody decides they want to sign up, we can actually afford to give real meaningful dollar amounts when, instead of sort of treating this as some magic fairy dust that's supposed to sit on top of everything we're really doing in our serious marketing programs, we sort of say, shoot, can we afford to give people $250 if they refer a friend who signed up? If the math says it, treat it like any other CAC.
Yeah, you got to see your CAC to LTV ratio, and like a lot of people shortchange referrals. But for example, Boast automates access to government funding and R&D tax credits for U.S. Canadian businesses. I will pay $1,000 all day long for a client because I know what my LTV is, right?
Absolutely. And then there's one other. I just want to make sure I'm answering. Sorry, all these questions, and I'll talk about the PICS framework. That was a good plug. You should also test limited time to sort of say, you're going to try to get more people to sign up. And Gusto has a really successful promotion they do every year, where during the ideal time for people to be inviting their friends based on seasonality of the business, they double the referral value. And you should absolutely try that, because people feel like, oh, I better move now or else I'm not going to be able to. I know we're running up on time.
We can take another 10 minutes if you have.
Okay, yeah. Of course I do. I want to talk about PICS a little bit, because this is ultimately, it's just a mental model that may help you all remember how to think about this. I made a cutesy framework that's called PICS because nothing spreads faster than PICS, but all it is a way to describe virality. P in PICS is the percentage of users who will invite in the private channel or share in the public channel. I is the number of invitations or shares that each of those users will send. And C is the conversion rate on those invitations or shares to new users. And I think everybody gets this, but in case you don't, here's why virality can be so powerful. If I had a great party at my house, I used to throw a lot of parties, and I called a bunch of my friends and said, I want you to come to this party. And by the way, you can invite people too. The minute that the average friend starts to invite enough people with a high enough conversion rate that every new person added to the party is bringing more than one other new person to the party, that's when you see these incredible growth curves. That's when you see the 50,000 users a day. You hear stories of people taking off in San Francisco, landing in New York, and all of a sudden their app has 2 million users that it didn't have before. It's really hard to get there. I'm not wanting to pretend that it's not. But that's the core mechanic of referrals, is if you can really optimize and test, then I would recommend the PICS framework. You're going to be looking at, how can I increase the percentage of people who decide to invite friends? And let's just take the spa example, because I actually really like the challenge of talking through an example that's not all techie. If you want people to invite their friends, awareness is a #1 thing you're going to have to let them know. Hey, there's a benefit to you of doing this. And so how can you make that really obvious for them? Well, they probably have to visit the counter when they come to your spa. So it probably makes sense to have some sort of a little pop-up thing on your counter that says that you have a new referral program. And maybe it's a referral program that's on a limited time basis, which, by the way, the limited time can be for as long as you and I are alive, but people tend to respond pretty well to the idea of a limited time program. If it's not too annoying, you might want to talk to the sales folks who are working in the front of the office and say, hey, at these particular times, and I would recommend doing at a time when somebody's had a really good experience at the spa. So maybe do it after they don't do it when they're all stressed out and they want to run in. Do it and, hey, just as something to make you even happier. By the way, if you've had a good time, then you should know about a referral program. You can train people to do that. You're just trying to push that P number up, the percentage of people who will invite others to check out the spa. Now let's talk about I, which is the number of invitations. There's a whole bunch of things you can do with I. I would actually argue that I is sort of the most abused variable in the PICS framework, because everybody's figured out that maybe you can get 20% of people inviting and you can get them sending 5 invitations each. That first number, P, can only go up by 5x. You can never have more than 100% of people inviting. But in a world where people are connecting their email, in a world where people are connecting their phone contacts, that I number is somewhat unlimited. So that's the thing that LinkedIn and Facebook and Quib and Dropbox have all tapped into, that, hey, if we're going to optimize one number, it could be that one. The other thing you can do to get people to send more invites is you can have a tiered program, or you can go, yeah, if you send, one person who comes and checks out the spa, then you'll get a 5% discount. If you come together, if you come with 2 friends, you'll each get a 10% discount. There's a bunch of interesting things you can do to try to increase that number. And then conversion, this is really where I see a lot of people messing with the incentive, and you do have to get the incentive right. But really it's about the language. And even though you're automating the heck out of it, you're trying to accelerate organic trends. You're trying to make it really easy for Lloyd to tell me about this dope spa that he found and make it sound as organic to that human experience we've all had as it can possibly be. So it really comes down to just optimizing those numbers. And what I would say is you're going to know pretty quickly before you build anything if nobody is interested in referring your product. And if you find that out in your conversations with 5 to 10 customers, there's only 2 possibilities. They don't want to do that because they don't like the product. And unfortunately, this is true, like a larger percentage of the time than one would like. Or they actually do like the product, but they're kind of embarrassed, or they don't really see why they should talk to friends about it. This is why I would recommend having these conversations prior to building anything 100% of the time.
Awesome. No, that's fantastic. And I dropped the note there, percentage of users who invite or share, invites or shares per user, and then the conversion rate. Awesome. Brett's providing, giving us a shout out here. The series is great. Awesome. People are still sticking around. So we'll ask a couple more questions here. There's 100 people still here, which is phenomenal. How do you solve the chicken and egg problem to see if the referral program works? Because a lot of the times you're like, I'm just starting out. And, I feel that, even if you have a bunch of customers, you go and talk to them and you make it easy for them to refer. Starting with like 2, 3, 5 people is better than starting with nothing. But how do you solve this chicken and egg problem?
2 ways. And they're both worth considering. The first is don't build anything. This is the thing we've been talking about. Go talk to your customers, find out if there's actually an organic trend there that makes sense to try to accelerate. Because if there is, then it's worth making an investment in referrals. And if there's not, then there isn't. So the first thing I would say is there's no rule that says it has to be all happening via technology. Now, when you have gotten a signal that there's a desire for people to invite or share a little bit, paid ads are drastically overutilized to drive growth at companies or in the early stage. It's usually a sucker's game. It's especially a bad thing to spend VC money on unless you've got your unit economics really nailed. But they're freaking great for bringing people into a referral funnel. And I'll give you a trick that's a little bit dark arts, but I think it's worth knowing too. Depending on your platform, you can buy traffic for a social app from a country that's not the United States. You might buy traffic in the Philippines, for example, where people speak great English. They have incredible internet connections, and it's a lot cheaper to get a click. And so if your product can be useful for people that are outside the United States, as most social products can, you can get 100 times as many people to come in and get through the flow and try to do the referral program if you're buying in a country that's not the United States. And so highly recommend paid ads, including in non-US geographies, as a way to tackle that.
Awesome. Now, in terms of incentives, what are ones that you've seen work and ones that have failed, right? Like from everything you've done.
I'm going to lovingly poke at someone who asked a good question in chat. I think they said, which is the better incentive, money or custom software in a particular space? If you don't know what else to do, try money. Like, I know that sounds a little corny, but the deal is money is relevant to everyone. You don't run into a problem where, and I've seen this and it's actually really awkward. If you're putting forward a referral program, but really it's just another chance for you to try to sell your business. And, you know, instead of getting a message that says, hey, Lloyd tried this and he liked it, so Nick, you should try it and then you'll get $20. If it's Lloyd tried this and he liked it, maybe this is relevant to you or not, but there sure is another guy on the other end of this who would like to pitch you on the services he provides. Like, it feels bad. It feels different. You need to really simplify things a lot. And I see people getting too cute with referral programs, almost making the assumption that the recipient is going to be a power user. So if you've had thoughts like, hey, if you get referred in, then on your third, you know, contract with us, you're going to get, you know, X benefit, or we'll put you in our, you know, special premier program for people that get, you know, even more of the main thing we're trying to sell. Like, you're probably on the wrong track. It needs to be super simple. Super simple is usually status, and that would be better. Money, if status isn't really an option, or if you're lucky in something like Dropbox. And let's really unpack what's happening with Dropbox. They have an asset that people value where the incremental cost of them providing that asset is near zero. So it's the absolute ideal situation to make that available to people who feel like they're getting some dollars. If you're not looking at something in those categories, my advice to you would be to simplify more so than, you know, keep brainstorming.
Awesome. Now I want to dive into a couple of things, right? So I'm a big proponent of this. Do things that don't scale, do it simply. And if it's as simple as asking your best 10 people to say, hey, I'm going to give you a referral link, just share it to people. You get a referral, you pay them, simple, right? But at what point do you punt it or double down on it? What are some key metrics that you recommend tracking, and maybe some easy ways to keep on top of it?
Yeah, good question. In the PICS framework, percentage of users who invite or share, invites they send, and conversion on those invites. The I1 is sort of this thing in the middle that, because of all these platforms like email and like text, you can almost pay less attention to that. Like, it's okay to pay less attention to that. You need to be really paying attention to P and C. And I'll give you a quick rule of thumb. If you've optimized for a couple weeks and you can't get more than 2% of people to invite or share, it's not going to work. So just give up. Don't try to do it. It's not a good use of your time and your investment if you can't get 2% of people to do it in a world where you've tried to make it pretty prominent. And I forget to offer the tactical stuff sometimes, which is actually the most important. Prominent doesn't look like having a little gift box in the corner of the screen that you hope people will notice and use. It looks like interrupting the flow of the experience at some point with, hey, would you like to share this? It looks like you had a good experience. You want to try to do this. You may not end up with something that's that aggressive, but in your early efforts, and we totally did this at Gusto, we did it at Decent, it really works. You're going to want to put it front and center. So people either have to say yes or they say no. And if 98% of people are saying yeah, no, then either you really need to improve your value proposition and your messaging, or you shouldn't do it. Similar thing with conversion, but I would put the number a little bit higher. If you can't get 5% of recipients to at least click on whatever it was that was sent to them, then you should give up. If you can't get 2% of them all in to convert, then you should probably give up. And
when you say all in meaning 2% of people from referral to new client to you?
That's correct. Yeah, not from click to new client. If you can't get 2% of the people who got invited to become customers, then really look at your messaging and your value prop. Sit down with those users again, make sure that what you're putting forward is the way that they would talk to their friends about the product, but it's probably not worth diving in on. Now, on the flip side, don't expect you're going to be able to get 50% of people to send invitations. Like, that would be incredible. Anything that's approaching the double digits is really tremendous. So, you know, your happy zone is between 2% and 10% of people inviting, 2% and 10% of people converting. If you're getting a lot more than that, paradoxically, you're probably not being aggressive enough. You're being too targeted. If you're getting a lot less than that, referrals is not the right investment for you at this time.
Definitely. Now, Odera asks here, what are other ways you can use paid marketing to accelerate a referral program? Have you used that in combination?
Oh yeah, I do this all the time. People think that a referral program is just something. This is why I, in my heart, just struggle with these third-party services that I don't think offer a lot of value. We like to think it's just something you slap on there and it just works.
And in general, right? Like not only paid marketing, but any other marketing tactics you recommend alongside referral programs to drive growth?
Well, that's the right question, but here's the deal. You have to find out first. Think about it a little bit like the concierge MVP framework. Sit down with 5 of your users and say, hey, you're telling me that your preference would be to send an email, or your preference would be to send a text message, that the text message would look like this. Great, let's do it. You can do it yourself. You can have some of your users do it. You can test each step in this funnel. And if you can't get, call it again, 5% of people to click and 2% of them to convert in this so-called ideal case, then you're probably doing something wrong. But once you have started to show that you can do that, you know the output you need to create. You need to create an email that either comes from the app or possibly from the user. And then it's just running people through paid to go through a flow to try to get that P and that I number up as high as you can get it. And I is the number for spam. Like if we're being blunt with each other, I think that invite all is becoming less prominent and feeling more spammy. There are still thoughtful ways to use it in some cases, but really focus on making sure you have conversion. And I would hack that. I would say, I'm not building shit. I'm going to find out if we can get meaningful clicks, if the optimal case happens. Because if that doesn't happen, don't bother. Then you're going to focus on how can I make it make sense, so it's not just spam, to get a higher percentage of people sending invitations. So the last little trick there on the loop, if people have been invited in through a referral program, especially if it compensates them, but really either way, they have a greater expectation that there is a referral program and a greater willingness to participate in the referral program. So one of the things that's great about using paid ads, you get them in, they start to go through the loop, they improve your referral flow, and then all the people they bring in are more likely to also participate in the referral flow as well.
Definitely. And Eric has a case here, and maybe we can dive in it. I've sent our product to our LinkedIn company followers. At least 50% are providing their emails for a free product. What is the next step to have a massive referral campaign?
Good question, Eric. I have a couple questions for you. What would the result of a massive referral campaign look like? Would it be more people downloading that free product, or are you trying to get people to pay?
All right. So while he's doing that, actually,
while he's doing that, also 50% is stellar. That's
more people downloading the free product.
Right. So the problem is, and I invest, I advise, I do stuff. I'm happy to dig in with this more after this call as well. But what I would say is, if you're giving away the whole product for free, you have to find some incremental additional incentive to give that LinkedIn company follower in order to get them to refer the product out. So you sort of have to figure out what that's going to be. And if it sounds like you're already on a good track, for you, accelerating organic trends looks like doing more of whatever the hell you're doing that's getting 50% of people to provide their emails. So if that's part 1 of a web series, maybe you offer an early glimpse at part 2 for people that refer their friends, but I would need to know more about the actual content.
Definitely. So I'll let you guys take this offline, and this ties into my last question here is, you're an angel investor, startup advisor, we both are. How do you figure which companies are good fit for referrals, which ones are bad fit?
The honest truth is, I sit down with people for 15 minutes. I yell at them in some version of what I've shared today. I ask them a bunch of questions about their business. And then for me to be helpful as an angel, which is something I really care about, or for me to be helpful as an advisor, like I actually have to believe that I know something to help your company. So if you're in healthcare, I'm getting up the curve enough that I can probably help you one way or another, and I don't feel so badly. Otherwise, I'm trying to figure out if you're a good fit for referrals. And a lot of that is sort of the content that we've talked about today. I probably helped companies just as much by being like, this isn't going to work. This is not the right way to grow the business. Let's talk about if SEO would be better. Let's talk about if paid would be better. Let's talk about if, live sales would be better. I've created at least as much value that way as for the limited number of companies where I decide to dig in and try to really help, because the truth is, this isn't a one size fits all. But that said, like, whether it's an offline spa that's trying to get people to enjoy the incredible experience that has been created with their friends, you know, or an online social app, like there's usually a way to use these to have some impact. The question is how much you want to invest.
Definitely. And you know what's funny is there's no real product in the space that takes a holistic view, right? There's like everyone's like somebody's doing email marketing and somebody's doing SEO, but like this word of mouth is probably the most important channel that gets supercharged by combining it with everything else. I think we should build a product in the space where everyone can embed it and then sort of layer on different things like it's email, it's ABM, or like, you know, I send somebody to my referral link. Well, you know what? Can I then retarget them to either become a referral partner or retarget the people who hit that referral link to further buy?
I love this idea, Lloyd, but I want to make it even more meta. We're going to make it like Clubhouse. We're going to make it exclusive in the following way. You only get access if you share transcripts of 5 conversations you've had with your customers where you've asked them questions to ascertain the right way to actually do this. Because otherwise, you're just going to be wasting your time. The thing that people miss, it's build a product that people love. Don't be afraid to go talk to customers and don't make the assumption that they don't want to share. People actually like to share products that they love. That's the step that everybody skips. The rest of it is just optimization.
Definitely. There's a bunch of people sending you invites on LinkedIn. Nick, right? Nick at Decent. I think that's the best way.
Nick@decent.com is my email. I'm at Nick Soman at NICKSOMAN on Twitter. I run a company. We're launching an incredible product I'm excited about. So I will.
We need to partner. We need to partner as well. But I want you to close out with one thing. How did you? And I know you talked about it throughout. But how did you build the referral program at Decent? What were like the steps from zero to today?
This is the thing. I'm so glad you asked me because there are so few steps. We sat down and we talked to our customers, and I was so proud that we built something that they loved. I'm old. I'm about to turn 42. I've run a bunch of products and a bunch of companies.
You just need to wear a hat like me, and you know, 42, you look like probably 32.
Oh, dude, I've got my Hawaiian shirt. I still don't look as good as you, but I'm trying. But the people really love what we built, and I'm so proud of that, and I'm excited about that. Both because why the hell else are we doing this, but also because I know that it's easier to create that word of mouth when you're an accelerated organic trend of people sharing something they actually love. So then I went and talked to them. I followed my own advice, and I sort of said, hey, we could build a whole bunch of email stuff. I'm probably top 0.01% of people in the world if you want to design a performant at scale email program. They said, no. I don't want that. I actually like your health insurance enough that I want to share about it on my LinkedIn, which I didn't think I would ever say to anybody before. And I said, well, shoot, if you actually want to share about this publicly, which had not been my assumption, your users will surprise you, then it sounds like all I have to do is give you a link. And they said, hell yeah. And we gave them a link and we tracked the number of folks that came in.
What did you use to create that link? Because that's the complication, right? And then there's a whole bunch of products you can.
Yeah, we didn't use any off-the-shelf product. We had a developer these things aren't very hard to build. And a product that tries to charge you a lot of money to do it is wasting your money. I can ask the developer exactly what he did, but he got it done.
It's simple. You need a landing page with a tracking link that tracks all the way to conversion. So somebody signs up through it, then you know that they've signed up, and then you have some way to tie that to your database to say how much they paid you, so you can percentage.
You got it. And the last thing we did, since you asked for the step-by-step, we celebrated with our users when they actually created referrals, because people put this out in the world and then they just set it and forget it. That's not right. Like, these are—
How did you celebrate?
Helping you grow your dream. We sent them an email and said, congratulations, you just got some money. You know, by the way, like, here's your link again. Maybe you'd like to post this somewhere else. People want to assume they're not just putting this out in the ether and it's not going to work. We got a little bit cute with it. We started actually letting people know if they, you know, their link had been clicked. And the more activity they feel there is around this, if they really are believers in the product, the more they're willing to kind of continue to engage as ambassadors.
Definitely. And it's also moments, right? You talked about one thing which I really liked is moments of wow. And whenever users experience great moments on your product, you got to hit them with a request to refer. If they're having a shitty time in your product or haven't logged in, and you send them like, hey, refer me, like, who the hell are you? But they experience something great. And at that moment, you're like, bro or buddy, hit me up with a referral, and you'll get this experience even more elevated with cash in your bank or free product, or a trip to Hawaii kind of thing.
That's
Nick.
That's totally right. And also, like, if you do this right, you can accelerate the organic trend of building some people love and getting them to share it, and they will love you for it. Don't be an asshole like I was for the first 2 or 3 years and just only focused on making the number go up and to the right. It probably won't work, and people will be very suspicious about, you know, growth things you build going forward. So that's all I'll say. It's about
this community is a big example of like organic referral, word of mouth. When we started Boast, we knew we sell to founders, CEOs, and our goal was to help them become successful. We started doing these pizza nights, and every time more and more people would show up pizza nights. It was in Calgary, Alberta, where my co-founder was there, and I was like shuttling back and forth from San Francisco. Those turned into conferences and then meetups, and now these 2 webinars a week. And I kid you not, in the last year, we've added 60,000 people. Every time we do a webinar, I don't know where these people are coming from, but like more and more people are showing up. Word of mouth. If you do good stuff with a cadence, the word will get out.
You built something great, Lloyd. Let's be real. You built something great. It's better when your friends show up so you can talk to them about it. There's absolutely status. I mean, you even got your cool guy sunglasses on. And you might be able to make yourself or your company some money. So it gets a 10 out of 10 for me.
Awesome. I got to come to Mill Valley. We're going to have a drink in the next few weeks. Thank you so much for joining us. Love and peace, Nick. Love and peace, everyone.
Love and peace to you too, man. And congratulations on the new child. That's more important than any work crap we could ever talk about.
That's where I'm headed right now, directly to the hospital. Take care. Bye.
Right. Much love.